And our first talk of the session is going to be given by Dr. Sanjeev Sharma, who is a professor and head of cardiac radiology at All India Institute of Medical Science. And he's going to talk to us about X-ray evaluation in pulmonary arterial hypertension in idiopathic and congenital heart disease.
There is a blackout here. Dr. Prashant, chairpersons, friends, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure to be with you today. And I must thank Dr. Prashant and Dr. Anita for inviting me over to this exciting meeting. And what I'm going to do in two parts is actually speak to you about the imaging evaluation of pulmonary artery hypertension in a rather arbitrary manner, because I thought maybe a comprehensive, because a missing link here is the MR actually, which is the way to go for the future of diagnosis, prognostication, and assessing outcomes of treatment in pulmonary artery hypertension. So I will come back to the first lecture of the day today, and I will try and tell you the relevance of chest radiographs in establishing the diagnosis of pulmonary hypertension, and as you can see here, in its role in the management of pulmonary hypertension. As you can see, oops. What's happening? Why is this running forward? Oh, yes, okay. As you can see here, chest radiograph is abnormal in a majority of patients by the time they become clinically relevant with pulmonary artery hypertension. And you can also see there is a reasonably compelling evidence why chest radiograph should remain relevant in establishing the diagnosis as well as in identifying the etiology, as you heard, largely in the setting of group 1, group 2, and group 3, and group 4 of these abnormalities. You are able to find disease-specific changes in the chest radiograph. It is also a very useful method because it's so simple, it's so cheap, and it's so widely available for assessing the temporal sequence in response to therapy and prognosticating the outcome of treatment. Now, there are some features in a chest radiograph that are common. Irrespective of the etiology of pulmonary hypertension, you would see them. So let's try and see some of them. So when you see a chest radiograph, as you can see here, so the first abnormality which you would, for some reason I am unable to control this mouse here. But anyway, so what you can see here is the prominent pulmonary conus stands out as the hallmark in a chest radiograph with pulmonary hypertension. For the beginners, what you can do is you can draw a line from the top of the aortic arch to the left heart border, and if the pulmonary artery conus is projected outside this line, it generally is said to be enlarged. Good old days in the 60s and 70s, when we used to use chest radiograph as the sole arbiter of the pulmonary vascularity, we used to grade the severity of pulmonary hypertension depending upon the prominence of the pulmonary artery conus. Actually, this is a misnomer because there is no correlation between the severity of pulmonary hypertension and the radiographic abnormality of pulmonary conus in a given chest radiograph. Nonetheless, it does represent that the pulmonary artery pressures are abnormal. More than the degree of prominence of the pulmonary artery conus, actually, if you were to measure the relationship between the hilum and the intrathoracic diameter, this is a more reliable predictor of the presence of pulmonary artery hypertension. And how it is done is that you draw the anatomic midline by joining two or more spinous processes which are seen as an oval shadow in the midline in a chest radiograph. Once you get the projected midline, as you can see a straight line here, on each side, where the main pulmonary artery divides into the upper and the descending branches, that first degree branching, you measure the distance from the midline, and when you add up the two, as a ratio of the transthoracic diameter, as you can see here, this is a reasonably strong or a solid predictor of the presence of PAH in the setting of left to right shunt. So in patients in whom there is increased flow on chest radiograph, and this ratio is not abnormal, PAH is rarely, if ever, present. However, if this is abnormal, majority of these patients will have pulmonary artery hypertension in the setting of increased flow or a left to right shunt. So this is a reasonably secure marker in differentiating. Why this doesn't go forward? Okay. Reasonably secure marker in terms of differentiating patients with increased flow and PAH vis-a-vis patients with hyperkinetic pulmonary circulation. So having said this, the second important marker which we actually take as an objective marker of the presence of PAH is the size of the pulmonary artery. So we measure the right descending pulmonary artery and we measure it beyond the first degree branching, beyond its origin, about 1.25 centimeters beyond its origin. The right descending pulmonary artery is measured, and the maximum diameter ranges, upper limit of normal in females is 15 and upper limit of normal in males is 16. And in children below 2 years of age, it is related to the diameter of the trachea, 2 centimeters above its bifurcation. So usually RDPA is smaller than the width of trachea in children under 2 years of age. Whenever it is enlarged, it can be because of hyperkinetic circulation. It can also be because of PAH. So how do you differentiate the two? So typically in a pulmonary artery hypertension, irrespective of whether it happens secondary to a left to right shunt or as a IPH, you will see pruning of the peripheral arteries. So pruning basically means that we lose the diameter of the pulmonary artery by more than half at each degree branching. So typically, when the central pulmonary artery is dilated and the peripheral pulmonary arteries are pruned, we have the setting of PAH. And when the central pulmonary arteries are dilated and the peripheral arteries are not pruned, we have a hyperkinetic circulation. There is one caveat here. When we discuss PAH by and by, I will tell you how we can use this sign actually to differentiate PAH caused by, within the group 1 abnormalities, PAH caused by congenital heart disease and IPAH versus PAH caused by some uncommon disorders, like was mentioned in the previous lecture, Abernathy syndrome, pulmonary syndromes, cirrhosis, etc. So, having said this, another abnormality on the chest radiograph that you can see is areas of regional oligemias, or a very peculiar distribution. In other words, there are some areas which are relatively light or relatively white, whereas there are some areas which are relatively black or relatively oligemic. This happens because of this, in the setting of pulmonary artery hypertension, because of mosaic circulation, and in the next lecture I am going to touch upon this in a little more detailed manner. Another sign common to all pulmonary artery hypertensions in chest radiograph is the presence of calcium. So calcification generally denotes, first of all, calcification is pathognomonic of pulmonary artery hypertension. So when you see calcium in the setting of dilated pulmonary arteries, you do know that this is not hyperkinetic circulation. This is a whether or not hyperkinetic, this is a PAH which has set in. This calcification usually happens in the central pulmonary arteries, in the main pulmonary artery, and in the proximal right and left pulmonary arteries. It usually is curvilinear, and usually it denotes an left to right shunt with an Eisenmenger syndrome or an Eisenmenger syndrome standalone. Now beyond this, there are features which you can see in the heart, an increase in the heart size, increase in the right heart size actually. So chest radiograph actually is a very fallacious way of interpreting right ventricular hypertrophy or dilatation. Nonetheless, usually there is a retrosternal area between the heart and the sternum which is translucent. When the right heart enlarges, this encroaches onto this area, but this is historic because you no longer do lateral chest radiographs anymore. So this is just for historic interest. Nonetheless, in the PA view, you are able to identify right atrial enlargement with reasonable accuracy. And how you do is, you measure the height of the right atrium. Now typically, you draw a transverse line at the level of the aortic arch. You draw another transverse line at the junction of the right atrium and the superior vena cava. and you draw the third transverse line at the level of the right cardiophrenic angle. When you do that, you will, in normal patients, the distance between the lower two lines is less than the distance between the upper two lines. In other words, the width of the pedicle is much more than the width of the heart. When the reverse happens, RA is always said to be enlarged, and this sign is very specific for right atrial enlargement. So in a chest radiograph, when you have a dilated central pulmonary arteries and a dilated right atrial chamber, you do know that this may be a marker of right ventricular dysfunction. This is a rather crude way of assessing it, but nonetheless, it does relate to CT or echocardiographic assessment. So as you can see here, there are some common features in a chest radiograph that will tell you in a given patient that this patient does have pulmonary artery hypertension. Moving on, chest radiograph can also be used to categorize or classify pulmonary artery hypertension into a given clinical group. So whether it is group 1 or group 4, or whether it is group 3, where there are lung abnormalities, whether at the level of alveoli, or whether it is because of post-capillary hypertension, because of left heart failure, chest radiographs can give you some understanding of this. So let's try and look at some of these. Here is an example of primary or idiopathic pulmonary hypertension. You can see a large heart. So there is an importance of seeing serial pictures. So what happens in a patient with left to right shunt? If you have a chest radiograph today, and you have a chest radiograph some months down the line, or some more months down the line, how can you predict the appearance of PAH in the setting of hyperkinetic circulation? You do so when the heart starts shrinking, when the lungs start clearing, when the central vessels start appearing slightly more than what they were. This is not the time when the patient is getting better. Actually, this is the time when PAH is setting in. So in this setting, when you see pruning of the peripheral pulmonary arteries, dilated central pulmonary arteries, in the absence of hyperkinetic circulation, this is basically a diagnosis of exclusion. Chest radiographs also help you identify or classify structural heart disease. As is an example here, this is the patient with a large heart, but you can see a dominant left atrial enlargement in the setting of hyperkinetic circulation and central pulmonary artery dilatation, as well as peripheral pruning. Are you able to appreciate all this in this? So this is an example of a left to right shunt intracardiac at ventricular level with a setting of PAH. Now, these can be localized irrespective, cutting across, whether it is a left to right shunt which is intracardiac or it is extracardiac, or typical example of an abnormally located dilated pulmonary artery which is high and medial. This is virtually pathognomonic of truncus. So I am not here to tell you the radiographic appearances in congenital heart disease. What I want you to know is chest radiograph not only identifies pulmonary artery hypertension, it is a surrogate marker of right ventricular dysfunction. It can identify some structural heart diseases. It can also identify with a reasonable accuracy a lot of pulmonary diseases which can produce pulmonary artery hypertension. For example, this is an example of interstitial lung disease. Here is another example of interstitial lung disease. And then we have some very typical chest radiographic abnormalities which can be produced in the setting of thromboembolism. Thromboembolism is not the subject today, so I'm not going to try and discuss each of these radiographic abnormalities. What I want you to go home with, the idea is that chest radiograph is able to reasonably differentiate patients in whom PAH is caused secondary to heart disease, congenital or acquired, secondary to thromboembolism, and secondary to pulmonary diseases. It's not the best of imaging techniques to differentiate these, but nonetheless is reasonably accurate in doing so. So, two diseases deserve merit when we talk about type 1, group 1 abnormalities for PAH, and these are two diseases related to some rather uncommon. Nonetheless, they do come along with Abernethy syndrome, pulmonary veno-occlusive disease, and primary capillary hemangiomatosis. We never used to actually appreciate them in the 80s and 90s. Why? Because we were not aware of them. As our awareness levels have increased, we have started diagnosing them more commonly, and now every year we do see 10 to 12 of these patients, and with increasing numbers. Why? Because we are more aware of them and we are looking for these abnormalities. So both of them actually work on, this is a disease which affects the venules or small veins. This is a disease which actually happens at the capillary level. They both may superficially look like IPAH, but nonetheless do have specific radiographic abnormalities. In this setting, you would see septal lines, you would see no LA enlargement with septal lines. So whenever you see a chest radiograph, which looks superficially like an IPAH, you do not see the LA as enlarged, but you see septal lines, immediately think of veno-occlusive disease. If you are able to see some mediastinal lymphadenopathy in this setting, it is virtually diagnostic of it. In this similar situation, another example which looks almost like a IPAH, but nonetheless, if you look at the chest radiograph more carefully, you would find some nodular shadows. So when you see some nodular shadows, reticular nodule pattern in mid and lower zones, in this setting, think of PCH. So this is another example of PAH. If you look at this X-ray here, it might just pass off as an IPAH. But nonetheless, if you look at the mid zones carefully, you see some nodular lesions. When you see the CT, you see typical radicular nodular pattern, which is seen in the setting of PCH. Now, I've already alluded to these. So I started with an index. I will probably end with an index. So here is another example. This index basically, so I told you about how the HILA can be measured related to the transverse diameter of the heart, and this can be a reasonable method to differentiate PH because of left to right shunt and left to right shunt without PH. Did you understand that at that time? So this is a more reliable predictor of the same thing. So you measure the hilar widening as a ratio of the transthoracic diameter and present this as a percentage. So if it is more than 44%, this is a very reasonably secure diagnosis of PAH in any given setting. So I will conclude here to tell you that chest radiograph, as you have seen in the previous presentation, is reasonably secure for establishing the diagnosis as well as identifying some of the causes in the setting of PAH. It is not a very reliable predictor of the severity of PH because there is no direct linear relationship between the radiographic abnormalities and the hemodynamic measurements that are made non-invasively or invasively, but it does help in monitoring the progress of disease and addressing the response to therapy. As I told you, serial radiographs can help you detect early appearance of PAH in the setting of hyperkinetic circulation. Thank you so much for your kind attention. If you have any questions, I will be happy to answer. Or maybe we can take both the questions together after the CT lecture. That also is possible.
Yes, I think we can move ahead. It is a continuation of the...
No, actually it is not.
Okay.
So there is an intervening lecture in between the two lectures.
So is it okay if we continue? That will make it, and then...
Oh, perfect,
Okay.
perfect. So then I need to dig out my lecture too. Let me grab some water too.
Thank you, Professor Sharma, for the wonderful talk. You know, this is an art which has now been forgotten with the availability of echo. And it's not uncommon to see so many patients come to us with an echo report, CT report, but you ask them for an X-ray, it's not available. And it's such an important tool in the overall workup of these patients.
Perfect. So we move on. And what I'm going to now do is to tell you where CT stands today in the evaluation of patients with PAH. So CT is a good way to confirm the presence of PAH. We can do any form of CT actually. We can do a CT, even a contrast enhanced CT, which is done for the chest, abdomen, whatever, will give you some information about this. But nonetheless, if it is gated, it is perhaps better. You can use CT to clearly place or identify the group of pulmonary artery hypertension. You can identify specific cause within each of these 5 groups, and you can use this CT for some form of functional assessment in the setting of pulmonary artery hypertension. For this issue, we do a CT which is basically gated. This gated CT can give us exclude pulmonary thromboembolism in an appropriate clinical setting. And the lung windows can identify problems related at the capillary level or at the alveolar level. We can use CT for prognostication of the outcome, and we can use CT for guiding and for follow-up after therapy. As I told you a while ago, MR and CT, they are both orthogonal imaging techniques. They are both non-invasive, and they both are actually complementary to each other. Why? Because CT will give you information about the structure. It is primarily structure dominated. MR will give you information about function. It is primarily function dominated. But nonetheless, there is a lot of overlap. So today we have CT which can give you functional information. We have MR which is reasonably secure for anatomic or structural information as well. So what is it that we can see? On the CT, I was debating when I was preparing this lecture. I could go based on the classification system, so I could go from group 1, travel the journey through to group 5, or I could combine the abnormalities together and segregate them anatomically. So what I have done is, I have tried to segregate them anatomically. Nonetheless, we will digress a wee bit and get into the individual groups also, if possible, if the time permits. So you can see imaging abnormalities in the pulmonary arteries. You can see imaging abnormalities in the lung parenchyma, in the heart for identifying structural abnormalities, and into the mediastinum. In some of these disease states, mediastinum is also abnormal in some ways. So let's look at each of these individually. Nonetheless, I want to draw your attention to the slide above. This rather colorful slide is actually an advancement in the early 2000s, when the gated CT or multi-detector CT became available. This particular advance was not available. So this concept of dual energy CT, wherein we acquire information at 2 energy levels, subtract the 2, and try and get some functional information out of it in terms of regional blood volumes, whether in the brain or in the lung or in other bodies. We can try and understand some hemodynamic sequences, hemodynamic changes that happen within the systems. In the context of PAH, it's important. Why? Because we are able to measure the lung volume. We are also able to measure the regional lung volume. We are able to subtract the 2 and produce these maps. Whereas in trying to understand the participation that they make in terms of hemodynamic changes. So in terms of CT, how do we diagnose PAH? The usual understanding is that in an axial section, most of you do echocardiography, so you would understand this. The ascending aorta and the main pulmonary artery are lying close to each other. Normally, the ascending aorta is bigger than the main pulmonary artery. When the reversal happens, it usually is associated with PAH. This is a rough, not very accurate marker. However, if the main pulmonary artery standalone is 29 millimeters or above, it is a reasonably secure marker of the presence of PAH in this setting. If this is clubbed with comparing the diameter of the segmental pulmonary artery with the segmental bronchus, if the segmental pulmonary artery is also bigger than the segmental bronchus in 3 or more locations in the lung, this is virtually diagnostic of the presence of pulmonary artery hypertension. Having said this, it's important for you to remember, some people say that, okay, PA diameter will change over time. Well, PA diameter does not change over time. Aortic diameter changes over time, but PA diameter by and large does not significantly increase with age beyond 2 years of age. So that's very important to remember. Why it is important to remember is because this original concept of relationship of ascending aorta to the main pulmonary artery as a marker of PAH will change. But nonetheless, if you were to take an absolute diameter, it probably will not change. Also, it is important to remember that dilated pulmonary artery, contrary to popular belief, actually can compress upon the surrounding structures including the left main coronary artery, into the airway or into the recurrent laryngeal nerve and present as hoarseness. I do have seen a patient who was investigated with a CT primarily to exclude a mass was because of PAH. So having said this, when you combine the ratio of MPA and ascending aorta with the RV systolic pressure derived from echo, this composite index is actually far more accurate as a predictor of the presence of PAH. So I told you in the previous lecture that when the PAH sets in the setting of hyperkinetic circulation, there is pruning of the peripheral arteries. Do you remember that? So now let me try and introduce a new concept here, not a new concept actually, but a new understanding here of this pruning. So typically in IPAH, in pulmonary thromboembolism, in all group 1 disorders, you do have peripheral pruning which sets in when PAH sets in. But when you see dilated central pulmonary arteries in the setting of PAH, but no pruning, but dilatation as you go towards the periphery, this is virtually pathognomonic of a set of abnormalities wherein the PAH is produced by hepatopulmonary syndrome, cirrhosis, Abernathy malformation. So increasingly, as an earlier speaker told you, he showed 7 cases of Abernathy malformation in a collection of 100 patients of PAH. That's a rather high prevalence, but it's not. It's actually true because we are also seeing Abernathy malformation more commonly now. Why? Because we are more aware of it now. We would see one pulmonary capillary hemangiomatosis or pulmonary veno-occlusive disease in 2 years or 3 years in the 80s and 90s. Today, every year we see 5, 7, 10, 12, 15 of them. Why? Because we are more aware of it and we are more tuned to diagnosing them. So having said this, as I told you earlier, so chest radiograph will show calcium, but it's a rather crude way of seeing it. CT will show calcium much better. Why? Because it is more sensitive to detecting calcium. Calcium in pulmonary arteries can happen. Why? Because it can happen because of premature atherosclerosis that sets in. That can be the reason. It can happen because a thrombus which is there, which gets calcified. So thrombosis of the pulmonary arteries can be seen both in hyperkinetic PAH, in pulmonary thromboembolism. But the way this thrombus looks in the chest imaging is different. You see a mural thrombus in the setting of a left to right shunt which has gone into pulmonary artery hypertension, and you see a very different type of thrombus which looks more like an embolic occlusion which you see in CT-PAH. That's not the subject today, so I'm going to skip that. So another new understanding of PAH which is coming through with the advent of these orthogonal techniques is the concept of PA distensibility or reversibly PA stiffness. This is an important concept. Why? Because this is turning out to be a very secure marker of prognosis. So loss of distensibility which happens because of PAH is a standalone marker of mortality. We know. But we also know now we can use imaging techniques to measure this distensibility. So we do a gated CT, we measure the end systolic diameter of the pulmonary artery and diastolic diameter of the pulmonary artery, and then we use this formula to measure the distensibility. And as you can see here, there is a cutoff in terms of distinguishing patients with or without pulmonary artery hypertension if this distensibility is 16%, 16.5% or less. This is a diagnostic of PAH, and patients who have less than 20% distensibility is a marker of actually mortality in the setting of PAH. MR actually measures a reverse parameter. It measures the degree of stiffness and shear wall stress. And when it measures the shear wall stress, actually there was a paper last month in fact, which is very interesting because this is the evolving concept in terms of evaluating patients with PAH and addressing this issue in terms of prognosticating the outcome of therapy. So moving on, what are the other ways we can use CT to interpret PAH? You can see changes in the pulmonary arteries. You can see changes in the heart. Basically, you look for right ventricular hypertrophy. Listed here are some parameters which are identified as by way of which you identify a given right heart as hypertrophied, a right ventricle as hypertrophied or not hypertrophied. Most importantly, we measure what is called as the RV-LV ratio. So whereas in an echo, you would use the systolic images, in an MR, it is the diastolic image which is used. In the mid ventricle, we measure this ratio. Normally, this ratio is 0.9 or less. When it is more than 1, the right ventricular dysfunction is diagnosed. And when it is more than 1.2, as you would see in the next slide here, it is associated with a 6-fold increase in 30-day mortality. That's very important. And more importantly, it is the volumetric assessment in terms of assessing the RV ejection fraction, which is a more direct predictor of mortality in this clinical setting. There are also some crude ways at grading the presence and severity of tricuspid regurgitation on CT. As you can see here, it can be graded from grade 0 to grade 3, depending upon the opacification of the IVC as well as the hepatic veins. Also, this has been related to the cross-sectional area of the inferior vena cava as well as the shape of the inferior vena cava. Each of these can be, in a composite manner, used to grade or to assess the severity of RV dysfunction. CT can also be used to identify structural heart diseases. For example, here in this slide, you can see a typical atrial septal defect with a mural thrombus in the pulmonary artery in the setting of PAH. Here are some examples of the left to right shunts. That's a PDA here. And here is another example of a sinus venosus ASD. And this is an example of a midvascular VSD. What I'm trying to show you is not the anatomic diagnosis, that these images can actually identify any given structural abnormality, whether it is cor triatriatum or whether it is a left to right shunt at any which level can be identified in a CT image. CT tends to go beyond identifying these structural abnormalities in the heart or in the pulmonary arteries. So typically in patients with PAH, you would see some of these white changes in the lungs, what we call as centrilobular ground glass opacities. What's its relevance? For you to remember what the relevance is important is that this is seen whenever you see ground glass opacities in the setting of PAH, it denotes a few things. One, this is a patient who has severe PAH. Two, this is a patient who is on treatment for PAH. This is not usually seen in patients of idiopathic PAH who are not on vasodilator therapy. So for some reason, patients who are on long-term vasodilator therapy tend to develop these centrilobular ground glass opacities over time. What is the relevance? The relevance is that if you do know that this patient is not on treatment and this patient chest X-ray looks like a PAH, but the CT shows some nodular shadows, in this setting, this is usually produced by, I told you in earlier lecture, produced by pulmonary capillary hemangiomatosis. So that's a diagnosis which comes through immediately when you put the algorithm together. That's the importance of knowing these algorithms. Then, of course, there are these mosaic attenuations, which I talked to you about in the chest radiograph also and in CT also. So mosaic attenuation, what does it mean? It means that normally the lung is homogeneously opacified. In terms of whiteness or blackness, the whiteness is because of vessels and blackness is because of the translucent lung parenchyma. Now, when there is abnormal vasculature, because of pruning, because of shunt, because of vasculitis, because of variety of reasons, so you find some areas which are normal, which appear as light, and some areas which are oligemic, which appear as black, and that produces mosaic attenuation. In different disease states, this will be produced because of different reasons. For example, a pulmonary disease, interstitial fibrosis, will be because of destruction of lung parenchyma, fibrosis. So that fibrosis is producing whiteness. So because of a different combination of reasons, you can have many causes of this mosaic attenuation, but nonetheless, mosaic attenuation is associated with pulmonary artery hypertension. And as I told you earlier, so if you see septal lines, this can be produced by interstitial lung disease. You can see septal lines, it can be produced by PVOD or PCH. Let me just show you quickly both of these examples. So when should you suspect PVH or PVOD? PVOD is suspected when you see septal lines no LA enlargement, some pleural effusions may be seen, but nonetheless you see smallish looking pulmonary veins and you see mediastinal lymphadenopathy. In this setting, I would suspect PVOD in appropriate clinical setting. When would I suspect pulmonary capillary hemangiomatosis, or PCH as we call it? In a patient who chest radiograph looks like primary PAH, but I see nodular shadows. On CT, I see nodular shadows and no septal thickening. And no mediastinal lymphadenopathy is usually not seen. So we did talk about this, we can skip this. So thromboembolism will produce typical abnormalities, not only in the pulmonary arteries, but also hypertrophied vessels which will arise from the aorta, hypertrophied bronchial arteries, or hypertrophied non-bronchial arteries which will be supplying. So typically in a patient with IPAH, where is that gone? Yeah. In a patient with IPAH, you would see dilated central pulmonary arteries. You may see some mural thrombus because of long-standing severe PAH, but you will not see hypertrophied bronchial arteries commonly. So we come back to this concept. I introduced this very briefly in the beginning. So dual energy CT is actually helping us in a big way in understanding the hemodynamic alterations that happen in the setting of PAH. Why? Because it has this unique ability to measure regional blood volumes. Now lastly, you will see some mediastinal finding also in the setting of pulmonary artery hypertension, and as I told you, primarily this relates to the presence of lymphadenopathy and hypertrophied collateral arteries. When you see hypertrophied collateral arteries either from the aorta or from the non-bronchial circulation, it usually tells you that this is not IPAH, but probably secondary to some form of obstructive pulmonary vascular disease. It could be vasculitis, it could be thromboembolism. CT also helps you identify some of the complications which are associated with pulmonary hypertension. For example, we talked about premature atherosclerosis. Pulmonary artery dissections can also be well identified on a CT pulmonary angiogram, provided that it is a gated study. So friends, CT pulmonary angiography plays a central role in the management of pulmonary hypertension. It establishes the diagnosis with a very high positive and negative predictive value as well as specificity. It defines the cause. It is able to categorize pulmonary hypertension as group 1, 2, 3, 4. Emerging evidence suggests and new research suggests that it is not very secure but a reasonably secure in terms of establishing the hemodynamic compromises which happen secondary to pulmonary hypertension, and it helps prognosticate the outcome of therapy. That's what is important. Thank you so much for your attention. If you have any questions, I will be happy to answer now. You can join both the lectures. It's a range actually. It's a range. It's 9 to 15 and 10 to 16 for patients older than 2 years of age. Yes, I told you, if you can club this measurement with the relationship of the end-on bronchus and the end-on vessel. Normally the end-on bronchus is bigger. If the end-on vessel is bigger than the end-on bronchus, in the setting of a dilated central pulmonary artery, it is a more secure way of establishing the diagnosis of PH.
We have found occurrence of isomerism, either left or right. So have you seen any such patients? How common is it in your experience?
See, isomerism, left or right isomerism is a standalone abnormality. It has some correlation, some association because it has, both of these are associated with complex congenital heart disease. So both of them can have PAH. But isomerism standalone as a marker of PH is not
No,
possibly true.
those children didn't have any congenital heart disease.
Oh, that's very unusual. That's very unusual.
We have had almost 4 or 5 patients with isomerism with pH.
This is unusual. So left isomerism without any structural abnormality is rather unusual.
10% of isomerism have Abernathy syndrome. So have you ruled out Abernathy?
You
in
should
them?
rule out Abernathy syndrome. Exactly.
One had Abernathy.
Exactly.
Worth keeping in mind.
So we also have one patient with isomerism, but that patient had a coarctation of aorta. So we dilated the coarctation of aorta, but still he continues to have pulmonary hypertension. So we don't know why.
So, rule out Abernathy, rule out a hepatopulmonary syndrome in these patients.
Yeah, our patient doesn't have that. So, okay, thank you, Dr. Sanjeev Sharma, for a wonderful talk. And it's extremely important to recognize certain rare diseases on CT scan. It can avoid a lot of catastrophe later on. And I sincerely thank Dr. Sharma. Recently, we had a case of a 7-year-old child who was labeled as idiopathic pulmonary arterial hypertension. We took him to the cath lab, we gave him nitric oxide, and the child crashed on table. And then we went back, saw the CT again in detail, took a second opinion, took a third opinion, and turned out to be pulmonary veno-occlusive disease.
So this is the important point. If you miss out on PVOD and PCH and you give vasodilator, they just crash, pulmonary edema, and die. So the important thing is to identify these two conditions before you start or institute vasodilator therapy.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you, Dr.